This podcast is a live action role play for entertainment purposes.
CERN, so it stands for the European Organization of Nuclear Research. I think people kind of forget about that because they hear Hadron Particle Collider and they immediately are distracted from the basis and the fundamentalization of what the organization is actually doing and what they're kind of ultimately about. There is a major global Stargate, universal Stargate activation happening down at Machu Picchu right now. It is the sacral chakra of the world, and it does have the strongest magnetic field.
Machu Picchu or CERN. They're both stargates, it appears, possibly, right? And one's natural, one's cosmic, one's artificial. CERN gets activated on the 5th, and then a string of events take place after that. Go back to 2012. CERN activates July 4th. And then they do it again 10 years later, but it's on July 5th. Like, did they have to wait for the stars and the planets to line up in a specific way to turn it on? And by turning it on, yes, they are crushing particles. They're looking for the smallest point. They're putting all this energy into a finite point, which is probably going to ripple out into the universe and the multiverse and create what some people refer to as the Mandela effect. Cryptos are getting hot again.
Hey, how the heck are you? I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. Do you know what feels awesome? When you wake up in the morning, you get a cup of coffee, and then you go sit down at your computer, you look at your trade alerts that you get by email, you make a trade that takes about 10 minutes, and you make enough money to pay for your next vacation. Trade Genius Academy, check them out. I've been trading now at Trade Genius. I've been very successful at Trade Genius. You can too. Look at these attaboys. They're even offering a 40% discount on their non-bundled items if you use the code Father's Day. And if you get the bundled option, not only do you learn how to trade and you get access to a whole bunch of opportunities, but you can see gains in hours that it takes some people months, even longer to experience. I have personally seen this. Trade Genius Academy. You'll be glad you did. I'm going live right now, and I'm hitting record. And oftentimes when we start having conversations, the best stuff comes out at the beginning. And then it's like, are we recording yet? So I'm just going to hit record now so we don't miss anything. And I'm looking forward to this opportunity. We were going to speak in Peru, and unfortunately the internet was really lacking out there. I was supposed to go to Peru, supposed to be there right now, but they had some transportation strikes, I heard. So we postponed it until November. But it's fascinating. I don't know what's going on with Peru, but the synchronicities are amazing. I've even got a great friend named Kevin Hogan, which is one of the world's top NLP, conversational hypnosis. His wife is from Peru. And so all these cool synchronicities about Peru, maybe that means I really need to go. What do you think? Is that what that means?
I say definitely listen to the synchronicities, because I think there is a major global Stargate, universal Stargate activation happening down at Machu Picchu right now. It is the sacral chakra of the world, and it does have the strongest magnetic field. When I was there, I actually seen the Stargate, psychically, of course, after I had visited Machu Picchu. And well, it was incredible. It was incredible. It was amazing. It's not something I can fully put into words, but I can tell you that it's definitely different from the one that I seen in Egypt or in Giza. And that's what I'm coming to find out the more that I research them, is that every single one is completely different. Every single one has a different structure, the way that it sits inside the earth, where it generates and pulls its power from. Sorry, if you hear some noises in the background, it's probably just like my dog running around, and then maybe my daughter too.
No problem. But, I got a lawnmower in the background here, so that's what I'm hearing. Besides you.
Yeah. What I had seen is I was really connecting into the spiritual energies there through the Incan and through the Kiro and through just their shamanic traditions, the Apu, which is the spirit of the mountains, Pachamama, which is the goddess of fertility. And the night after I went to Machu Picchu, I had seen Pachacuti just kind of present kind of on this throne in like a skeleton form, and kind of gave me like this initiation to see inside of the Stargate structures, because I held that intention while I was going there. I was like, I really wanted to see it. I needed to be able to understand the vortex. And So it came to me and I seen just this really ultra radiant metallic like Stargate that was embedded into the mountain underneath Machu Picchu about a third of the way down. And I had seen that it was funneling or collecting energies from the trajectories of the Crux constellation, also the Pleiades constellation. A lot of that energy was actually funneling into the carved stones that they had, and specific stones they were generating that celestial quantum for just spiritual power, spiritual energy. I could even feel it as I was walking through Machu Picchu, that some areas were more heightened with just more magnetism, a lot more memory field, a lot more opening to blissful and magic states as well. I felt like a lot of ecstasy and euphoria in certain spots, which was interesting. I think it's just because they're so high up in altitude, the connection to the source field is really, really strong. And I think we're just going through a global, universal recalibration from this Stargate that is reforming the magnetic grid. Somehow it has something to do with the magnetic field, the organic D13 current, because all of the metallic that I've seen, which I later talked to somebody who told me that is probably the alchemical composition of holmium, which is the most raw, pure magnetic alchemical state that we have or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so there's like a lot of holmium here. And it makes sense because the sacral area of the globe within the holographic matrix, even within the biology of the body, of the human body, is the strongest magnetic field within the body, encapsulated within the heart magnetic grid. So it's just, I can see all this transformation happening just within the magnetic field. And yeah, so it's really overwhelming. I've been just out of it since I've gotten back. I'll be honest with you.
Well, what was it like when you were out there and you're at what, 17,000 feet elevation? What was your elevation?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember. It was so high though that I did struggle with catching my breath a lot because it's no joke. It's a trek. Like you are hiking, you are going up these really steep steps. Everywhere you go, it's up straight up a mountain. Like there is no getting out of that or getting around that. So I don't remember exactly the elevation. I'd have to look it up, but it was really high.
When you were out there, was it filled with like tourism?
You know, I was surprised there wasn't a lot of Americans. I kind of realized I think Americans stop at Mexico. They don't keep on going down. It was a lot of Europeans and just, you know, from the other side of the continent, basically. I would say the tourism stays kind of in Lima and Cusco. A lot of people just go into Aguas Calientes as like a one night thing. Everybody's in a rush. Like, do you have your tickets? Like, get on the bus, hurry up and get to Machu Picchu, get back down to Aguas Caliente and go back to Cusco. Everybody's on that same mindset. I totally dodged that and just stayed a whole week in Aguas Calientes because I realized that it was the spiritual gateway to Machu Picchu, that the people there were the sacred keepers. They were the sacred holders of the spiritual energy. And there was so much to do in Aguas Calientes. There was all kinds of cascadas or waterfalls and like stuff out of the Garden of the Eden. It was really beautiful. Like it was. And here's the other thing. Oh my gosh, here's what I've actually been really wanting to tell you. Is how profound the earth spirits speak to you there. I mean, it is like you're just walking in hyperdimensional, like clairaudiency, and it's just really, really strong. You can feel how alive the spiritual Merkaba, just the overall living energy current of spirituality there was just, it's bursting through the land. And it made me realize coming back here into these saturated, dense, artificial, electromagnetic radiated fields that the spiritual land is dead here. I mean, it's just not talking or speaking the same way it is there. I mean, yeah, it actually made me really kind of sad. That's kind of another thing I'm seeping back into is I'm feeling this overwhelming sense of disconnection here in the major cities. and all of these areas where we have these degraded grids. Like that's what they are. This is why there's so many zombies. This is why there's so many negative incarnates or imposter spirits or soulless beings or whatever we want to call, people who are just not living spirituality. Like if they're not talking about it, if they're not acting it, if they're not feeling it, it's not alive within them. It is dead. And that's what I'm realizing and it's because of the land, it's because of the environment, it's because of the grids. They're so saturated with artificial frequency and grid computations and artificial overlays that the natural spirits can't actually speak here. In the cities, in the major areas, everywhere they're harvesting indigos in California, New York, Manhattan, all these areas. I mean, it's just, I know we can connect to it when we go into because you're in Colorado, right?
Yeah, I'm in Southern Colorado.
So you go into the Rocky Mountains, you probably hear and feel that there in the Rocky Mountains, the spirit.
Well, so you said something that kind of triggered me a little bit. And I was like, I'll bring it up in a moment, and not a bad thing. But when you said the land here is dead, it certainly isn't dead here in Colorado. It certainly isn't dead in the Four Corners area. It's alive. It's alive and it's well. And you need that nature. I think when you're in a big city, though, if you're in a big city, what you're talking about, that makes sense. And you said something else that triggered me. And I was like, whoa, that makes sense. Spiritual connections, right? That spiritual conversation that we have. It's a lot more difficult to get to if you're in a city filled with routers and cell towers and all these different antenna systems sending out different frequencies for different electronics. It doesn't feel alive there. It's a different kind of alive. It's like the electrical Borg. Yes, take orders, do what we say, pay to get to work.
And then that's why you can see why there's such a infiltration or intrusion of parasitic energy or intruder energy or, just dead miasma, dead plasma. I mean, that's what's it's just a field or a buffet for lower spirits and incarnates to attach in and hook into people and take over, because there's no light body there to begin with. There's nothing to sustain it when we're in these more degraded grid areas. So yeah, that was just kind of the contrast that I seen and felt. And that was really frustrating because it almost felt like the whole system almost has to just be wiped out and just let the earth heal. Let the spirit come back alive. Let these things have a chance to, again, speak through the wind and through the trees and through, all of that. So, yeah. But yeah, Denver, Colorado, the Rocky Mountains. No, I mean, it's alive in those places. But yeah, I'm talking about
Denver's kind of pardon my language.
Yeah, well, no, I agree. I actually lived in Colorado for 26 years. So I just moved. And because it was getting just more and more kind of suffocating, but I was in the Denver metro area,
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So yeah,
Denver's cool. If you're into a city, Denver's a cool city. I'm just not into the big cities. But anyway, let's don't talk about that. I want to hear about your awesome experience in Machu Picchu, and I want to share a photo with you. I just took this photo. Put these two photos together, and I think I'm going to use this for the thumbnail of our podcast. Check this out. Machu Picchu or CERN. They're both stargates, it appears, possibly, right? And one's natural, one's cosmic, one's artificial. And I question if you brought up CERN, so I think we should talk about that, because CERN activates, right? CERN gets activated on the 5th, and then a string of events take place after that. Go back to 2012, CERN activates July 4th. And then they do it again 10 years later, but it's on July 5th. What did they do? Did they have to wait for the stars and the planets to line up in a specific way to turn it on? And by turning it on, yes, they're crushing particles. They're looking for the smallest point. They're putting all this energy into a finite point, which is probably going to ripple out into the universe and the multiverse
and create what some people refer to as the Mandela effect, not the like the legit Mandela effect. There's a few of them out there. So what is your thoughts? Like, are they bringing people in? Are they bringing beings in? Are they bringing a consciousness in? Or are they just manipulating the universe as we know it with CERN?
You know, it might be the latter, what you just said. I'm so happy that you kind of just brought us into that, because this has kind of been on my mind. And this is what I've been seeing a lot, is that all these string of events, I think, ultimately originate with CERN. I think what is going on through this Machu Picchu Stargate activation is it's taking us more gamma atomic nuclear energy, whether we're conscious of that on an organic level or whether we're conscious of it on an artificial level. But I think both is simultaneously playing out. And what I mean by that is, if you look at CERN, so it stands for the European Organization of Nuclear Research. Okay, so I think people kind of forget about that because they hear Hadron Particle Collider and they immediately are distracted from the basis and the fundamentalization of what the organization is actually doing and what they're kind of ultimately about. I think CERN provides a mask of protection of future exploration of particle universe, when really it's guiding the highest level and orchestration of nuclear research, AI global grid computing control, which will technically control all of the overlays. So when we talk about these celestial overlays of the Aquila control network, I've talked about those before with the Georgia Guidestones. That's what it's tuning into on an artificial level and taking control over. And I think it's controlling artificial intelligence. I think artificial intelligence is nuclear intelligence. That's what I'm coming to in terms of research and just feeling into it. It's like a living nuclear intellect. So having that said, when we look at what CERN has done, I think it's the headquarters to the CIA, right? I'm like whispering that.
Oh, yeah. The CIA loves you. They knew you were going to say that.
Okay.
They have a sin on you right now. And they're like, yes, in simulation 14, we knew she would say that.
I know. I'm like, there's no abbreviation. What do I call them? Central something agency. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, I think that CERN that's kind of the apex of it. And we look at what the CIA has been responsible for, MK Ultra on national levels, global levels. There's network and substations of CIA that reach down to the Vatican, militarization complexes, DARPA organization, Washington, D.C., all the banking institutions, and the Georgia Guidestones. It's all connected through radio, artificial, nuclear, atomic, living energy programs, things that have been developed. When I was doing the remote view on the Georgia Guidestones, what I seen underneath it was, this is just intuition, psychic stuff or whatever, but I seen pools of nuclear radiation that were at the bottom of the Georgia Guidestones through a lunar tunneler. And I'm thinking, why am I seeing nuclear energy at the Georgia Guidestones? It's just supposed to be this man-made vortex or whatever, but this is like way more heightened than that and is extenuated off of the satanic and Luciferian energies and all of the ritual energies. It's an accumulation of degraded plasma that has gone radionuclear atomic active, that is accumulating in areas where there's emotional discontent inside the grids. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but and even if you look at where the Georgia Guidestones was impacted in the southeast corner, it was impacted in the Swahili Hindi stone, which southeast points towards the largest nuclear power plant, or one of the largest in the United States, also pointing down to a nuclear submarine facility. So we have to follow the nuclear cookie crumbles, is what I'm trying to say. We look at these string of events that have happened, the Georgia Guidestones, nuclear activated. If you look at what CERN is about, nuclear research program, okay, they're not just blowing up particles to find the Higgs boson particle. They're, researching how to enhance the supercomputers, and they are the structure. They are what's holding the supercomputer network in the worldwide gridding system. They're the apex of that. They are the apex of the CIA. So, I mean, it just makes sense, right? It all is kind of coming back to what you said, the latter. That is it just this thing that's controlling the entire world?
You know, it's I don't know what's going on clearly, but it does seem to be kind of at the apex of technology. The CIA is they're in just about everything. So
Yeah.
from the research I've done, they're up there at the top of the spear, and they do seem to be connected with the Vatican, or the Vatican seems to be connected with them. And it could go back to the Vatican actually creating a intelligence branch that could be used. I mean, you could take it back to probably maybe even off world. That's the research that I have done. Something that is non-human is controlling the show, or something that thinks of itself as an ultra terrestrial. It doesn't have to be extraterrestrial, but it's an ultra terrestrial system. And CERN, now that this is interesting, because there was about 7 years ago, there was a guy in his laboratory that was holding something up that was code for a term that people thought had something to do with the Mandela effect. And he was like smiling, he's pointing at it, he's like, hey, look. And there was a lot of weird stuff going on back around 2012 with people's memories, you know, and oh, it's the Bernstein, not the Barnstein, or the Bernstein, and all the, and that's just one of many. But what I remember was interesting was the guy that was the host for Louis Anderson, big guy. He was the host for Family Feud for a while. And I remember something came out on the news saying that he died. And then years later, he's on Amazon in his own show. And I did a podcast on it, and some other people like, yeah, I remember that too. But first of all, that doesn't mean that the timelines changed. It could have been just us remembering things differently, or been a false news article. There's been a lot of stuff that people are like, wait a second. Because I remember Luke, I am your father. I remember that. And I don't remember the silver leg. And I mean, I grew up watching Star Wars and Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back like all the time. I mean, that was embedded in my psyche. So there's some weird tweaks. And so you turn on the colliders, and you turn on CERN, and you put as much power as you can to explode these particles at one finite point. You've got this ripple effect that probably extends out into maybe even causing other dimensions to overlap. But what's fascinating is Shiva, the destroyer and the bringer of, you know, like the bringer of life and the destroyer of life, the yin and the yang, embedded as a gift to CERN. Ancient Vedic wars, they have certain weapons that can destroy entire universes, entire galaxies. I find it odd that they chose that as a gift for CERN. Your thoughts?
I'm on board with you with that. You might find it interesting to know that the submarine nuclear facility that's southeast to the stone that got blown up at Georgia Guidestones is also represented by Shiva as well, by the trident. So there's like a lot of, I guess, continued. I have some really cheap earphones in right now. I think they're from the plane. I'm like, they're the only ones I can find. But yeah, so I agree that there's definitely this destroy to create reversal that I think energetically is running, that's connected to all these things. I think what they did at the Georgia Guidestones was they ripped open a black hole. I think it was impacted there to rip open a black hole in the space-time continuum, because it's drawing energy, negative incarnate energy to the site, and has been for a very long time. There was already radioactive nuclear pool at the bottom. I think they are targeting nuclear sites to open these wormholes. I think there's something in that, and that they're using the nuclear energy to rip open the black hole, and also to experiment with the black matter and the antimatter. And it has something also to do with the gravitron, which is the beast machine in the earth. So there's like beast machine mechanics. That's what you said, non-human, off-world, something that just, and that's why when you're saying that, I'm literally thinking, is nuclear energy, is that, anti-human, is that off-world? Is that something that came from somewhere else? I mean, it must have. It probably came with a meteorite impact or something. how is the nuclear energy generated from inside the planet, the organic part of it?
Well, I don't know about that, but what is interesting is think about all the sightings when nuclear testing was going on in the 40s. And then also there was a lot of occult rituals going on at the same time. And occult rituals and scientists have been hand in hand for a very long time. I mean, it's scientists is looking for that edge, looking for that extra information. And a lot of times occult practices are involved. I mean, look at Jack Parsons, the grandfather of rocketry. And they tapped into some stuff that and energies and consciousnesses that are outside of this third dimensional plane and the research that I have done. So by doing that, the question is, was there something that gave them the technologies to create nuclear energy that was off world, that you could, that you could say is alien? Just because it's not human doesn't mean it's from another planet. But that would make sense, that this information, this technology is given to allow for this portal to be opened up, to allow for these beings to live in a different plane of existence. And then they'll trade technologies and information. And in doing so, it's actually building their empire in this plane. And Reagan gave that speech that was brilliant in '87 to the United Nations, where he brought up an off-world threat. And then he said alien. And then he said, well, isn't it already among us, or something along those lines, referring to something alien? And it's your definition of alien. What is your definition of alien? What is it that permeated the mindset of these global leaders to profit so much off of war?
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings me 360 full circle, going back to Atlantis. And I think we talked about that narcissistic mental body that I feel seeded through the Meldeck system, or through the exploded asteroid belt. This going back to Tiamat, the explosion of Tiamat, and just the original creation stories of how these grid templates were installed. So I could say the grid templates are technically mental bodies. Overall, the magnetic field is a mental body. The crystal field is a mental body. The diamond field is a mental body. The narcissistic templating that installed from the Meldeck, the threading or the grid structures energetically that came in through that implosion, which was a war planet, which brings in war mentalities, is a grid template. So it's a mental body. That's really interesting. I just made that correlation here just talking to you now. But I think you're right, though, that this is about science, mad scientist, and that temperament of the mad science, that they've been financed by these occultists and these Illuminati bankers. And they're kind of the ones that ultimately are at the core of designing the ability to gain control over all of the quantum forces on this earth. So that, I think, is clearing more, or at least through this Stargate activation, at least through the Lion's Gate. I think that's what's being revealed more to us, is what's the difference between what's living and what's dead? What's the difference between what's organic and what's not? And what we can kind of do as we work to strengthen the magnetic field again, because I think that's what's weakening through all of this experimentation of nuclear energy, bioweapons, directed energy weapons, ripping open holes in the space-time continuum, open all of these black holes. It's just degrading more of the magnetic field. And that gets restored through these great alignments that we have, astrological alignments, all of these things. But yeah, it's just really, really crazy what they're doing. That's why I said I go from being super happy to go back to being like super sad. It's really crazy. I'm on this roller coaster ride right now with the energies that are coming in, between feeling this extreme state of cosmic bliss and almost like celestial orgasmic state, to like being like, oh my gosh, like this is so awful. I'm literally living in zombie land, like, and spirit is just not living inside anybody. I don't know. You can see the contrast that we're working through right now. But yeah, it's really interesting what's going on. I think the correlation with CERN is at least providing us more insight into all of this. I think we have to understand more of what's going on there with them. And I think that's really important to understand that how we can, make shifts that are needed amongst ourselves in these times where we're up against such monstrosities and beast machines and things that are just so degradational to the Earth's spiritual spinning Merkaba field. That's what they want to do. They want to take over and hijack the entire Earth's spiritual body. And they're already fracturing it in a lot of places. That's why we have dead grids. That's why we have wormholes where they can harvest souls and indigos and basically create collective fields of loosh that they just store this, hijack spiritual quantum energy that they just feed off and feed the beast machines and feed the AI machines. And they're literally funneling human blood through these systems. That's what it's consumed by. That's what's feeding it. And
what?
I don't know. Yeah.
Human blood through like what? Quantum computers? They're like, oh, it has a new cooling system. This one's RH negative. It has extra copper.
Yes, exactly.
What do you mean by that? Like when you said that a minute ago or a second ago.
That's exactly what I mean. Like AI blood, silver blood is feeding on human blood, computated into their global networks and world networks that they have, and feeds all of their community grids, IBM, Windows, Linux, Mac, Android operating systems, all of that, like technologically, financially, all of our blood gets funneled into those systems. And it's just this giant human consumption network, right? Where human life is being traded for corruption and greed and the development of nuclear intelligence, which is what we live for. We're living to feed nuclear intelligence right now. That blows my mind.
Living to feed nuclear intelligence. You know what? That's one of the things that I remember from our previous interviews. I'm writing this down. Living to feed nuclear energy. You've got some of the coolest verbiage, and people are like, what the hell is she talking about? Listen. She has a rhyme for her reasons. Geez. Well,
sometimes I get lost in what I'm saying. Trust me.
Okay. I respect that. I appreciate that. It's like one hell of a way to boil water. Nuclear energy. Think about that.
Yeah.
They're boiling water to produce energy with nuclear technologies and nuclear elements that can have radioactive half-lives of tens of thousands of years, sometimes even longer. And there's biology that can thrive in certain radioactive environments, and there's biology that will be destroyed. And radiation is fascinating. So is there an intelligence? This is like a whole new spin on things, a whole new thought process. Is there an intelligence that uses nuclear energy to feed itself, to bring itself into this realm? But at the same time, if it completely overtook all organics, then it itself would need another host, would need another mechanism. So the Matrix is right. And Terence McKenna could have been right. We live in a symbiotic relationship with something that disguises itself as an extraterrestrial invasion so as not to alarm us. You heard that term before?
Yeah.
McKenna, that guy was like he was a psychonaut. So you have to take what he says with a grain of salt, because he took so many mind-enhancing, altering substances in his life that clearly he saw a lot of stuff that most people won't. But that was one of his famous quotes. And he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And a lot of these psychonauts are brilliant because they're like modern shamans, but you just still have to question, okay, what was it that he saw? When you say you're in a relationship with something that is disguising itself as extraterrestrial so as not to alarm you, does that not alarm you?
Yeah, definitely. It's such a mind as it is. I mean, but Yeah, it's definitely alarming. I'm so happy that you're kind of tuning into this potential that the nuclear field might be a living, intelligent field of itself. And we're just enhancing it. We're just working with it. We're so fascinated with it. And we use it for all of our exploration that we're actually growing it and developing it and nurturing the essence of it here, when I think it completely goes against our connection to what we're supposed to be doing here, which is really just honoring life and the earth and the land and our connection to our soul and all of these things. But, you know, big boys with their big toys want to go explore with the nuclear particle hadron accelerator 100 feet under the ground and blow some things up. And, you know, when particles get spinning that fast, I mean, it's definitely taking us into another multiverse of existence within this realm. I mean, they could slip up and have one misfunction and boom, like the whole world is going to be basically blown to an infinite speck of dust. I mean, especially when you mess with antimatter. I mean, that's what the whole movie, the Angels and Demons, was about, with Tom Hanks. And wasn't Tom Hanks one of the ones who was on a what are those called, where you were just talking about it, an event that, a Mandela effect. Everyone thought Tom Hanks was dead.
They did?
For a while. Yeah, there was like a thing that Tom Hanks died. He was another one that people thought he died and came back.
Wow.
But yeah, Angels and Demons, that movie, they're talking about them going in with antimatter and potentially blowing up the Vatican, going back to the Vatican, coming around 360. I think that's why Machu Picchu is activating right now, is because it, due to its coordinates, its coordination, is coordinated to the Vatican as in, so if Machu Picchu is a fifth dimensional stargate site, the Vatican is a fifth dimensional reversal man-made gate site, Saturnian site. They have inner earth networks. I think a lot of the clearing that's coming through globally is going to the Vatican. You look at all the fires that were in the Vatican, you look at all the internal conflict and political conflict they have going on with their that's retiring or whatever, and wanted to put in his resignation, and they didn't want that. So then they started having internal wars and conflict. All of Canada won't let the Pope set forth on their land. Like all of the indigenous of Canadian are like fed up with the Pope. There's all that warfare going on. What needs to happen is the Vatican needs to release all of its artifacts, because it has stolen artifacts, stolen books, stolen things that have prevented history to be able to come forward. So they need to return their artifacts to the indigenous, let them tell their stories, heal the intergenerational curses on this earth, all of the hybridization traumas that are going on. I personally feel like that's kind of what's clearing through the Lion's Gate. Like we're getting, and that's why the fires are there. It's symbolic to let us know that there's an internal transformation happening there right now. Maybe it's not to the level that we want to ultimately see, but that's how this universe works. Everything just trickles and piddle paddles, little bones it throws you here and there. You know, we have to do this by little slices of barely getting to where we want to go. But because we can see, you know, the future outcome of the things that need to happen, but we can't necessarily tie in all the gazillion multidimensional pictures that string in through string theory and make that happen. So I think more is clearing at the Vatican. I seen a lot of that when I was in Machu Picchu, that was what it was connecting into and was sending transmissions. I think there's a lot of intergenerational damage that was done on the Incans and on that gate site when the Spaniards came in and kind of took over and built all their Catholic churches on their sacred Incan temples and stuff. And so it really ties it in. They did that
on the Zuni reservation too.
Yeah.
Literally.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, please continue.
They've done it everywhere. I mean, in Canada, it's a big deal. I think there's like actual like legal teams, like indigenous legal teams that are like suing the Vatican and have like his warrant for his arrest. Like, I don't know if you've seen this. It's something called decree something.
The indigenous, the first tribe nations oftentimes, and you know what? We might see that here if there's an invading force. We personally might experience what the natives did.
if an invading force wants our land. You know what I mean? It's like, it's this constant battle, but the First Nations and their history and their knowledge and their mythologies and their stories and the amount of truth that's embedded in those it really needs to be passed on to the next generations. And the problem is when you have a force, like whether it's nuclear or whether it's, you know, whatever it is, it doesn't want that native history passed on. It doesn't want the truth about nature passed on. It wants people to think they're separated from nature. It wants people to think that nature is just there for them to, you know, to get their next meal or their next, whatever it is they're into, their desires. But really nature is our mother. You know, it feeds us, it clothes us, we get water when we're thirsty, and we have to treat and respect nature. And I think that those that studied Wicca and occult practices with being one with nature, they were connected with the mother. So they could, you know, and the mother would communicate with them and they would communicate back. And when they needed help, they would get it. And when the mother needed help, we're supposed to be stewards of the earth, right? Like, we're not here to destroy the earth. Maybe we're here to build something that'll divert a meteorite or an asteroid that would destroy the earth in the future. Maybe our karmic, all the karma that we've built up with all the help we've gotten, maybe we can create a civilization or a society that will do something that will be the opposite of what we've seen over the past 50 years with these giant megacorps. Maybe megacorps will be created to save the planet, not just to pillage it. Anyway, I'm going to get off the soapbox now.
No, I love it. I love it. It's absolutely true what you're saying. And that's why I said what I said when I got on, was that I feel so sad almost being home because I can't hear the earth spirits the same way. Like in Machu Picchu, they're just like constant chatter, constant speaking, constant whispering in your ear, constant coming up from behind you and saying something in your ear. Like it's so magical. It's so alive. The energy is so powerful, and it's very intimate. You know, it is the sacral chakra of the world. You are taken into that sacred valley, and it's literally holding you in the womb. And there's a lot of intimacy, sacred spirituality, sacred sexuality, creativity, everything regarding your relationships. I mean, that comes up to move through you and clear while you're there, because the spirit of Pachamama is so strong. And yeah, so you come back to the city area and you're just not hearing the sacred spirits like through the wind, and you're like, what is going on? Like they're infiltrating the grids here. And I don't think people realize to what degree. I think if people could really see the difference between the grids, like if we could pull up some 3D thing and be like, this is how alive this one is, this is how saturated and dense and just dimensionless this one is. There's no dimension. It's hacking the magnetic field and it's degrading it. And so I think people would crap themselves if they saw the difference truly. I mean, it takes being removed to see and feel the difference. And so, yeah, I say you definitely should go if you're still thinking about it. It was
supposed to go
magical.
in November. You know, I mean, we've got everything scheduled for November, so hopefully it'll work out. And yeah, we'll see. It sounds like it's just such a beautiful, sacred place.
Am I still frozen?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on.
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on today. And I'd like to talk maybe a little bit about my services. So I do have a new service on my website, IndigoAngel222.com, and it is a Lemurian implant regression and tag removal, mostly for the divine feminine. And it is to assist with just the divine feminine transformation and the depth of the distortions and the artificial machinery that we carry due to all of the things that have happened throughout history. And so it's really amazing. I did maybe 3 weeks ago talking about the history and the creation of woman, all of these things, all of the technology. And so I just would suggest that session to anyone who maybe feels that they align with some of these implants and tags that can be ancestrally or karmically tagged and hit in the field as well. I also have a deep chakra clearing, 13-dimensional chakra clearing, and I also do J-seal removals as well. So if anybody is interested in that, just that I would tell you about that.
Right on. Yeah, thank you. And make sure to subscribe to IndigoAngel, hit the bell for all notifications. You can see some of the recent videos out there in Machu Picchu and Pachamama. And on that note, folks, thank you. Have a beautiful day, everybody, and be the change you want to see.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Live shows free every day, uncensored. You can even ask the guest and myself questions. Check us out, bigproject.com.